feeling like an outcast after being the narcissist scapegoat. Have you often felt different from everyone else in group settings? Or has it seemed like a matter of when, not if, others will see you as an outcast? And have you found yourself feeling excluded and unwelcomed in your friendships or relationships? Well, if you answered yes to any of these questions and survived narcissistic abuse as a scapegoat, then you may have learned to survive by thinking about and experiencing yourself as an outcast. And in today's video, I want to discuss how a narcissistic parent can treat a scapegoat child in ways that get that child to identify with the sort of identity of being an outcast. Then I'm going to describe the dilemma faced by the scapegoat child of either taking on this identity of outcast or feeling like nobody to no one. And last, I'll emphasize the importance of finding new, sustained relationships with people who can afford you ongoing connection so that you can experience a new reality where feeling like you matter to someone important does not require you to assume such painful beliefs about yourself, such as that you are an outcast. Well, my name's Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I specialize in helping people recover from narcissistic abuse. And this form of abuse can leave us feeling lost and estranged from our very senses of ourselves. So in individual therapy and through my online course on recovery from narcissistic abuse, I try to offer a map that allows survivors to come back or to find the quality of life that they know they deserve. And of course, each survivor has to travel this path for themselves, but I think this sort of map can be tremendously useful in doing this. And there are three key features on the map that I call the 3 pillars to recovery. The first pillar is making sense of what happened so that you know it wasn't your fault. The second pillar is gaining psychological, emotional, and sometimes physical distance from the narcissistic abuser. And the third pillar is living in defiance of the narcissist rules for living. And you can't do this in a vacuum. It's really important to find and participate in communities of people who can get, validate, and support you as you're on this path. And today's video falls under pillar number 3 of living in defiance of the narcissistic abuser. And if you're interested, all the videos on this channel are categorized into playlists that correspond to the 3 pillars. So if you were a scapegoat survivor of a narcissistic parent or partner, then I encourage you to check out my free ebook on the topic. It's called Surviving Narcissistic Abuse as a Scapegoat, and it goes into other important aspects of what it's like to be in the shoes of the scapegoat child or partner of the narcissistic abuser. You know, from self-limiting beliefs about yourself that you had to adopt in order to survive, to why the narcissistic personality is so geared to put those closest to them down. I think this ebook can help you realize how none of this abuse was your fault, but was rather the product of the narcissist's psychological and emotional problems or pathology. And you can find the link to the book or the ebook in the description box below, or by clicking here. How a narcissistic parent gets the scapegoat child to identify with being an outcast. A child with a narcissistic parent faces this impossible to solve problem of needing that parent's continued availability in order to survive while having to suffer severe emotional deprivation, distortive attacks on the child's character, and being exploited by the parent as a source of admiration or for the parent to feel superior. A narcissistic parent feels worthless at their core and often powerless too, and that yet copes by denying these feelings, projecting them into someone else, and then acting in coercive ways to get that other person to identify with that parent's own unbearable feelings. And doing this allows the parent to rid themselves of experience that undermines their artificially inflated self-worth. And I think it helps a lot if the narcissist has authority in the relationship to the person they're trying to relocate these feelings into. And of course, the child who's dependent on that parent for their psychological needs is definitely under that parent's authority and therefore very vulnerable to being abused in this manner. So if the child is regularly blamed for frustrations in the narcissistic parent's constant need for admiration and say to feel dominant, then I'd say that child has fallen into the role of scapegoat to that parent. And a parent who attacks, devalues, and rejects a child for being what the narcissistic parent can't bear to acknowledge in themselves is very much treated like an outcast in the family. So the child can have the experience of not belonging to their own family and being seen by that family as somehow fundamentally objectionable. In truth, the child is being pushed away by the narcissistic parent, but is instead led to conclude that it's that child's own defectiveness that makes it impossible for the narcissistic parent to love him or her. And in so doing, the child preserves his or her perception of the parent as infallible or sort of perfect or viable, while taking the lion's share of the badness upon themselves. And this transfer of badness onto the child's self and sort of laundering of the parent's character is needed when a child is being abused by a parent. And this is the first reason, I'll say, why the scapegoat child can feel like an outcast to the narcissistic parent. But there's another important second reason why the child can feel this way. Feel like an outcast or be nobody to no one. So in order to share a reality with such a narcissistic parent intent on finding the scapegoat child as devalued and deserving of such devaluation, the child must identify with the parent's devaluing attitude towards them. I know that was a mouthful, but I think and hope it'll be made more clear here. When I say share a reality with the parent, I'm talking about the feeling that the child knows in some very important way who he or she is and who the parent is. There's a sense of this is me and this is my parent that protects the child from something much worse. And that thing that's much worse is if the child didn't have the ability to play along with what the narcissistic parent requires to sort of share this contorted reality, because then the child would face a very unsurvivable state of not knowing in a deep sense who they are and not being someone to the parent. It's this very sort of disorienting, in an extremely terrifying way, place to occupy for the child. I kind of liken this experience to feeling like you're sort of trapped inside your own mind, able to speak, think, and to crave relationship, but being surrounded by, in essence, inanimate objects. And sure, there are other humans who may look like people, but they're not acting like they have insides as you do. And I think that's something what it can be like when a scapegoat child dares to not go along with a narcissistic parent's claims that it's the child who is to blame for everything. The parent's pathological narcissism makes it so that this is the only very rigid way the parent can kind of behold the child, which puts the child in a kind of comply with that parent's reality or kind of psychically die dilemma. So that's why it's so necessary to play the part of scapegoat to the narcissistic parent when the child's put into that role. When the child identifies with the parent's cast-off feelings of worthlessness, that can lead to the child feeling like an outcast in their own family. Although the child is known to a degree in the artificial kind of devaluation from the narcissistic parent that they're forced to participate in, they are treated as though they are unwelcome and in essence a burden to love, by that parent. So although the child gets to feel like they are somebody to someone, the price is they must shoulder the conclusion that they're not really wanted or liked in their own family, that in fact they are an outcast. So the importance of finding relationships where you feel welcome, particularly against the backdrop of having to feel like an outcast. Well, I can't overstate the importance of finding and participating in relationships where you feel a sense of welcome and belonging as part of the process of recovery from narcissistic abuse, again, particularly as a scapegoat survivor. And I want to emphasize that although YouTube videos like this are hopefully helpful and informative, I don't think they can be substitute for such relationships, whether in therapy or in one's own life. And the reason is that in order to learn that the old rules for being somebody to someone no longer apply, the scapegoat survivor needs new actual experience in new actual relationships that lets them conclude that they are known, cared for, and welcomed without having to believe that they are worthless or a burden. So of course, I think this type of content can definitely add to the process of new relationships, but again, I don't think it can substitute for it. And with that being said, the question might emerge of how a scapegoat survivor can identify people who can offer such kind of healing experience in relationships. And I'd like to point you to 2 resources. So the first is Module 4 in my online course on recovery from narcissistic abuse. In it, I go into depth on the qualities of people that make them safe versus unsafe, and provide a spreadsheet to help you identify the safe people in your own life so that you can cultivate more closeness with them. It also helps you identify who's maybe less safe in this regard, which can then allow you to set maybe perhaps more boundaries with them. And the second resource is related to the online course, and that's the membership to a private Facebook group for people who have enrolled in the course. And it's in essence a community where fellow survivors of narcissistic abuse get to share their experience in the process of recovery to other people who really get it and are supportive and validating. And I think it can be a good step in finding relationships that offer the needed new experience, and again, in sort of virtual reality, so that you get kind of a sense of footing to find the same kind of experience, IRL or in real life. Also, to protect confidentiality and hopefully build a sense of safety, members of the group have the option of posting anonymously so that their confidentiality stays protected. You can learn more about the course by clicking the link in the description box below, or by clicking here. Well, thank you for watching today's video. I hope you found it helpful in kind of understanding the really lack of choice faced by the scapegoat child when they're sort of asked to either feel like an outcast or be nobody to no one, but also then how you might recover from kind of having to live through that dilemma in the process of recovery, and the importance of connection in that process. So thank you for your continued engagement with the channel and for your very thoughtful and I always think brave comments that are being posted there, and the sense of community really that seems to have been there for a long time and is just so great to see each week in the comments section. Well, with that being said, I look forward to posting next week. Take care.